Hi, this is Ethan Skolnick for 5 Reasons Sports, and this is a solemn occasion because this morning it was confirmed that the great Don Shula, former Dolphins coach and of course former Colts coach, winningest coach of all time in the NFL, has passed away at the age of 90. Now, a lot of us who've been in the media and had seen Shula in the past few years were anticipating that this day could come soon. Don hasn't looked particularly good for a while, and I remember covering an event at Hard Rock Stadium, I think even before it turned back to Hard Rock Stadium a few years ago, that Shula and Riley, Pat Riley, Heat president, were both supposed to speak at. So this was a big thing to have the two of them both sharing stories with a luncheon crowd. I can't remember the exact circumstances of why they were together, but they were supposed to be together. And we got the news about an hour before the event that Don was not feeling well. And so Pat Riley addressed the audience and gave a long speech, but some of it was a tribute to Shula, and it would have been cool to see them in that same place, both sharing stories. Now, listen, I didn't start covering sports. I know how old I am, but I didn't start covering sports in Miami until 1996. And of course, that was the year after Don Shula was kind of forced out of town. I mean, after all of his years of success, and to put this into some perspective, 2 losing seasons, 2 out of 26, 2. You know how many losing seasons the Dolphins have had in their other 28 seasons? 15. And a lot of the other ones were 8-8. So you're talking about somebody who was the first ever South Florida sports icon and the best winner in South Florida sports history. I think we can make a case that others have come close, Riley, Wade, etc. And I do think if you're looking at a Mount Rushmore of South Florida sports, to me there's no question. It's Shula, it's Wade, it's Marino, and it's Riley. But at that time in 1995, 1996, people wanted Shula out of here. I mean, let's not have revisionist history about this. They had put together this team with like 22 first-round picks in 1995, and it didn't win. They got off to a really good start. I remember them blowing out Buffalo early in the season. It fell apart down the stretch, and Jimmy Johnson was the hot thing. I mean, Jimmy had won with the Hurricanes. He'd helped build that program after Howard Schnellenberger. Then he won the 2 Super Bowls with Dallas, and everybody wanted Jimmy. And of course, Jimmy's tenure started well. He drafted exceptionally well at first and then made mistakes. He fought with Dan Marino. He didn't win that battle from a public relations perspective. He never got the big offensive player to complement the defense of Jason Taylor, Zach Thomas, Pat Surtain, and Sam Madison that he'd put together. He ended up passing on Randy Moss, which was very weird considering he had always taken a flyer on big-time players. And then he sort of lost interest. The last year, he was basically trading stocks, playing with his Yorkie, and trying to turn the team over to Dave Wannstedt. So it didn't really work out with Jimmy, but those were still decent seasons compared to what we've seen since. And I think what it's put into perspective is how great Shula was. One of the things that was so remarkable about Shula was his ability to adjust. If you think about the teams early, and of course I was born in 1973, the year that the Dolphins won the Super Bowl, actually right after the Dolphins won the Super Bowl with the undefeated team of 72-73, and then they won a Super Bowl the next year. They won those teams, befitting the style of the age. They won with a running game and with a defense, right? The no-name defense, Zonka, Kick, and all of those guys. It didn't have anything to do with the quarterback, really. I mean, Bob Greasy was good. He certainly deserves to be in the Hall of Fame, but that team also won with Earl Morrall. But what happened in the 80s, he had David Woodley, realized David Woodley wasn't good enough, drafted Dan Marino. Again, we can talk about how easy that was. A lot of teams passed on Dan Marino, right? He was the 5th quarterback taken in that draft. But not only took Marino, but turned the offense completely over to Marino. They became a passing machine. As a lot of people have said, Dan Marino was a system, okay? Joe Montana was a product of a system. He turned the whole thing over to Marino and put up the gaudiest numbers we've ever seen in the NFL related to a particular era. And no, they didn't win a Super Bowl. They got there, they lost to Montana and what was really a better team in San Francisco. And then Don struggled over the years to put together the pieces. Other than Webb and Sims on the offensive line, he didn't give Dan a whole lot to work with. The running game was never great. They struggled to find a back. And then the defense, we know there were years the defense was just awful. And then, of course, Dan had the Achilles injury in 93, and it was tougher to put the thing back together. And like I said, 95, they tried a quick fix, and he was out. But it doesn't diminish Shula's legacy. I mean, to do that kind of winning, 2 losing seasons in 26. I mean, we talk a lot about what Pat Riley's done here. I think they've had 5 losing seasons since Pat's come, and that was actually around the same time. So we're talking about almost 25 years. It's remarkable what Shula did. I mean, to have a record that's better than Riley's is pretty hard to do when we consider the icons of this town. Now, as far as my interactions with Don, I had a few. I will say he always remembered my name, which I appreciated. There was one circumstance where Jason Cole, who at the time I think was at the Sun Sentinel, actually he was at the Herald with me, and we had to do a project that was Shula on the front, on the cover, and Don's only concern, I remember going out to Miami Lakes and to his, to his steakhouse, and we went out in the back. His only concern was making sure we got his good side. He wanted the side where the jaw protruded more. And I always thought that was kind of funny. But just enormous respect for him. He was a man who commanded a room even when he was in a wheelchair. And I think what's coming across today, you look at the tweets from others, is the respect from his former players. I saw a tweet from Kim Bokamper, so you had the Killer Bees defense, but also those 70s guys. And listen, a lot of those 70s guys have passed in recent years. Jim Langer, Nick Bonacani, a lot of them have passed. They're not here to honor the man, but I think you're going to hear about it from Larry Zonka and some of the others and the others who played in the 80s, all the way up to an O.J. McDuffie, who was drafted, one of his best last draft picks in the early 90s. So a tribute to Don Shula. Like I said, Mount Rushmore, it's Shula, it's Marino, it's Wade, it's Riley. You can talk about Joe Robbie, Wayne Huizenga, LeBron James, others. It's those 4 to me. And the shirt I have on, Trust the Flow, says, to me, Brian Flores is the one coach who's come since who reflects the Shula legacy. Will he become Shula? Almost no one has, right? But I think there's a real opportunity for him to create a legacy with some of the same principles that Don Shula believed in. R.I.P.